Dada Ana Henga amenipa changamoto ya kutotumia karatasi. So wengine wetu tuko kwenye ule mfumo wa BBC, born before computers. IT tumejifunza kwa kubabaisha. Kwa hiyo mtanisamehe mkiona na kama vile sijui na kuelekea. Lakini baada ya kusema hayo, nianze tu kwa haraka kwa salimieni. Habari za asubuhi. Asalamu alaikum. Zile zingine sizitumii kwa sababu kuna tafsiri ya kuamini kwamba ukisema asalamu alaikum umesalimia kidini. Kumbe asalamu alaikum ni maneno ya Kiarabu yanayokutaka tu uwe na amani. Amani iwe kwenu, si ndio? Kwa hiyo mtanisamee kama mkusikia zile zingine, zile mbili. Haki za binadamu oye. Tamko la ulimwengu la haki za binadamu oye. Naomba muwe na mmekunywa chai jamani. Simepewa chai leo asubuhi hapa, nje tu hapa. Tufurahi. Tamko la haki za binadamu la ulimwengu oye. Thank you very much. Majuzi nilikuwa mahali na rafiki yangu Marcel Akpovo ugaibuni. Nikajikuta nazungumza Kiswahili kwenye hadhara isiyokuwa ya Waswahili. Na walinielewa. Leo niko Uswahilini na najikuta nataka kuzungumza Kiingereza. Inanipa changamoto kidogo. Lakini kwa sababu nilifanya kosa la kuandika maelezo yangu mafupi kwa lugha ya kigeni na lazimika kuitumia. Lakini maudhui yanabaki yale kama ambavyo ilivyotarajiwa. Basi nianze kwa kusema, my dear sister Dr. Ana Henga, the Executive Director, Legal and Human Rights Center, Madam Kagaruki, representing Ms. Anastasia Rugaba, the Vice Chairperson of the Legal and Human Rights Center, members of the Legal and Human Rights Center board, representatives of the Government of the United Republic of Tanzania, representing the Register of NGOs, Nakongo representative, my friend, my brother, I'm very happy to see you again today, Marcel Akpovo. For me, this is an honor, and I'm sure the Legal and Human Rights Center are so honored to have the director and representative of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, the East African region, in Tanzania today. He could have been anywhere among the countries in the region to mark this day. So I'm really glad to see you again today. Our Excellencies, ambassadors, high commissioners, representatives of international organizations and human rights NGOs, my sister, Dr. Ellen Kijobisimba, I'm very happy to see you again today. This is the former Executive Director of the Legal and Human Rights Center. Members of the media, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. Let me start at the outset by congratulating the Legal and Human Rights Center for staging this great event today. I am greatly honored to address you today on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Marking the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights today is the highlight of any human rights defender's work. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a document that deserves great celebration. Its architects occupy a special place in the annals of history. While it is necessary and important to celebrate the Universal Declaration and honor the people who conceived it, it is necessary to acknowledge that there are challenges to its full realization. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a document that is eternal in nature. You can hear me. You want to see me? So I should pause? It's not fair. Why should I be talking in the dark? I'm sure. Okay. You can see my silhouette. Okay. I was saying the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a document that is eternal in nature and holds. Oh, okay. Pause. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Hello. So we have to bear because we've got people wenzetu wenye usikivu hafifu au viziwi ambao wanahitaji lugha ya alama. Sasa tukiendelea gizani wao watakosa. Kwa hiyo kwa umuhimu huo tunabidi tuvumilie kidogo mpaka mitambo itakapokaa vizuri. Asante sana. Asante. Please bear with us as we sort out this technical hitch within the building. Bear with us and yeah. Tuvumiliane jamani wakati tukitatua tatizo hili la umeme kujua ni nini kimetokea au kimetriple. Kwa sababu baadhi ya vifaa na vinafanya kazi na umeme upo lakini jengo tumeingiwa na giza. Sijui haki za binadamu zimeogopa kabisa zikaona do. Asante. Wakati huo kama hukupata staftahi, tumia muda huu giza hili kwenda kunyaka kikombe cha chai pale nje. Meanwhile, in case you did not take breakfast, you can grab a cup of coffee or tea as we wait for the last lights to come on, but at least you'll be sipping on something delicious. Asante sana. Asante, naomba nikaribishe kwaya ya Mwalusanya imbe angalau wimbo mmoja wakati tukitengama mahali hapa. Kwaya ya Mwalusanya tafadhali, kwa sababu mziki unapiga. Karibuni. Mgeni wetu rasmi hajawasikia, hajui kuna kwaya. Hii kwaya jamani ilianzishwa na Kituo cha Sheria na Haki za Binadamu. Mimi mwenyewe ni zao lao. Naona tumerejea, kwa hiyo nadhani tutaendelea na presentation yetu. Kwaya tutahold baadaye kidogo tutawaita. Asante, karibu.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. That was due to events beyond our collective control. So, I was at a stage where I was saying that while it is necessary and important to celebrate the Universal Declaration and honor the people who conceived it, it is necessary to acknowledge that there are challenges to its full realization. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a document that is eternal in nature and holds the hope of millions because it contains the basic philosophical, political, legal, and the social framework upon which human society ought to exist. The Declaration is a beacon that enables humanity to navigate towards the goal of making the world a better place for everybody. Events around the world, including in Tanzania at this particular moment in time, make it quite uncomfortable for anybody, at least including myself, to sing many praises in favor of the Declaration today. However, that should not devalue the importance of the Declaration based on its promise and the reality. As I stand here today, we are marking the 75th anniversary in a somber atmosphere. This should not be so. Today should be a happy day across the world. We have seen also, even in this room, the atmosphere around the Mwalusanya choir was very happy. However, there are places where the anniversary celebrates with a lot of fanfare and optimism, while there are other places where the Declaration is seen as a hollow promise. I would liken in those places or in those circumstances that today's anniversary as being a contradiction, celebrating a birthday during bereavement or when they are bereaved. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I do not intend to impose my judgment on you, but I hope as free individuals we are able to make our own assessment on the scorecard of the past 75 years of the Declaration. Such an assessment should be based on our own appreciation of what human rights are or ought to be, based on the existence of the Declaration 75 years after its adoption. My personal experience, derived from the study and work in the field of human rights, has taught me that different people have different perceptions of human rights depending on where they stand. Some people think that human rights is the stuff made up of activists who do not live in the real world. And let me say here, take Tanzania for example. In Tanzania, if you are called mwanaharakati, it's a negative label. And let me also give another story. The other day, 2-3 years ago, I was listening to the BBC. And there's a very famous lady in this country who is known as Shangazi. She was interviewed. She was being interviewed. And she was asked, why aren't you doing work and you are doing wanaharakati? She's a lawyer, a prominent lawyer for that matter. And in her own style, she said, when I was labeled a wanaharakati, in other words, an activist, I went to the Swahili dictionary and I looked for the meaning of the word harakati, because harakati is what gives birth to the word mwanaharakati. And she says, what the dictionary says is somebody who does things passionately with conviction. Anything that you do with conviction makes you a mwanaharakati. And then she went further and said, for that reason, my grandfather was a mwanaharakati. And the grandfather is a respected man in this country. So I'm saying this, I'm giving this story to show that what I'm saying here about how people appreciate human rights depends with where they stand, where they come from, vis-a-vis human rights. But others argue that human rights do not operate in a vacuum. Therefore, human rights, like any other legal field or science or social science, is open to different interpretations. We witness human rights being interpreted and applied through political lenses, sometimes through social or legal perspectives, irrespective of the suffering of the victims of human rights violations. Now, this is in the particular case when there are issues of human rights violations, that depending on where you stand, the interpretation will differ. And I say, therefore, different people have different views about human rights. Human rights defenders, for instance, view and understand human rights differently compared to people in power, or even in some cases, vis-a-vis religious leaders. And I want to give another example. In this country, there's a judgment which has been waiting implementation by government for more than 5 years. And it evolves around the right of the age of a girl, of the age of a majority for a girl, particularly in relation to marriage. And it's 5 years now, probably more than 5 years. You don't understand why that decision is not being implemented. If you go deeper, they'll tell you cultural, religious, all these things. So, and this is what shows the lack of appreciation of human rights depending with where people come from, or the positions which they hold or they take. And I ask the question, why is this so? In its different interpretations, if you agree with me, there is one truism which we cannot escape or avoid, and that is the proclamation in Article 1 of the Declaration, which states that all human beings are born equal and free in dignity and rights. This is the basic principle upon which the entire human rights edifice is built. The Universal Declaration constitutes the embodiment of social, economic, political, and cultural ideals that we should all aspire to achieve. Madam Executive Director, when I was looking at the invitation that you sent me for this event, you stated that the theme today of the Human Rights Day today is dignity, freedom, and justice for all. You can see it over there. Oh, it was supposed to be on the screens. It's there. No, I am there. Oh, it is there. Okay, it is there. The theme of today's anniversary is dignity, freedom, justice for all. That invitation stated that the 75th Human Rights Anniversary would provide us an opportunity to highlight and underscore the importance of advocating and upholding human rights, the fundamental freedoms that every individual is entitled to be treated with dignity and to experience freedom in all aspects of life, and to live in a just and equitable society. These are not my words. These are the theme by the Center, and I believe by the Human Rights Fraternity for this celebration. Your invitation went further and stated that the 2023 Human Rights Day serves as a poignant reminder of our ongoing commitment to protect human rights and strive for a world where these principles are universally respected and upheld for the benefit of all. The words I just recited made me reflect a lot about the reality of life as we see and experience it from Tanzania, but across the world. The adoption of the Declaration on 10th December 1948 by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris had been preceded by the establishment of the United Nations itself in Francisco 1955. The Charter of the United Nations, which was adopted after the end of the Second World War, and Madam Director had just mentioned it, proclaimed in its preamble the commitment of the United Nations and the member states to save humanity and the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. The Second World War caused great devastation to countries, to societies, and humanity in general. But these were the political realities under which the Universal Declaration was adopted. The Charter of the United Nations went further and reaffirmed its faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and the nations large and small. The United Nations Charter states further that one of its purposes is to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect of the principles of equal rights and self-determination of all peoples, and to promote and encourage respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms on a non-discriminatory basis in solving international problems of economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian character through international cooperation. Therefore, from the very outset, respect for human rights was and would remain a core objective as well as a core function of the United Nations and its membership. I see the representative of UNDP around in the room, and they will bear me out on this matter. The Declaration, therefore, is an international instrument whose legitimacy, as well as its moral force, is derived from its universality. It's not a treaty, like other instruments that are ratified by states, but it's a common standard for humanity. The Universal Declaration inspired liberation struggles. Its existence challenged the colonial powers which proclaimed human rights while they treated people in colonial and occupied territories as subhuman. To this day, we witness this double standard where occupation continues. The right to self-determination remains true today as it was when the Universal Declaration was adopted. Now, according to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Universal Declaration has been translated into 500 different languages. It is the foundation of an elaborate legal and institutional framework. It has inspired the adoption of many international and regional human rights instruments. It is the umbrella of all rights, already protected as well as new ones to come. I'm sure there'll be a new instrument sometime soon or in future which will continue to clarify these rights. So the scorecard during the 75th or the 75th anniversary of the Declaration may, by and large, appear to be rosy in view of the achievements in the establishment of legal and institutional frameworks across the world, the existence of treaty bodies and special mechanisms of the United Nations, as well as regional and national human rights protection institutions which shine a spotlight on different types of human rights initiatives, as well as human rights violations. At the national level, many states have adopted constitutions and bills of rights that mirror its provision. And based on the above agreed premise of dignity, freedom, and justice for all, one would expect that whenever legislation all political, socio-economic programs are adopted or implemented, they would be tested based on these principles. Invariably, many states, big and small, and without exception, have adopted legislation, and in some cases, measures which in certain instances contradict human rights, in spite of their commitment to the Universal Declaration, and in spite of guaranteed under international human rights instruments and the constitutional provisions of many countries, are becoming increasingly risky, including in Tanzania. Political thought and activity are criminalized in many countries for the sake of clamping down on political opposition or for the sake of retention of political power and control on the pretext of maintaining national security or national cohesion. According to data available from Civicus, Global Civicus is an organization which monitors the situation of respect of civil political rights. This study says that civic space conditions in sub-Saharan Africa has been highly restrictive in 45 out of the 50 countries of the region, meaning that populations in these countries face restrictions in the exercise of civic rights and freedoms. The key civic space violations cited include attacks and the detention of journalists, intimidation, forceful disruption of protests, use of excessive force against populations exercising their political and civil rights. In some African countries, assassinations of human rights defenders have also been reported. Tanzania was not spared in the Civicus finding, whereby the attack on lawyers for undertaking their professional duties has been reported. While surveying the national scene, the removal of people from Ngorongoro is said to have been done in a manner the community concerns. The operation that started in mid-2022 involved the forceful eviction and relocation of thousands of Maasai from land that they have been inhabited for generations. And in a report released by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, based on its fact-finding, stated that the government acted hastily. Now, whether the relocation is good or bad for the community, irrespective of the ecological conservation or economic reasons behind it, it should have been subjected to the minimum, to consultations with the affected community. At the height of the relocation, particularly around June 2022, any objection to the forced removal and the relocation was met by violence by state security forces. There has been no room for sober assessment of the social impact of relocation of a people from their ancestral land. These are but some of the events in Tanzania that blot the country's image that had previously enjoyed a relatively good human rights record compared to many African countries. The Universal Declaration, once again, enshrined key principles such as equality, non-discrimination, equal protection of the law or before the law, fundamental freedoms, and the protection of economic, social, and cultural rights. And as I said earlier, these have been clarified in other instruments. Achievement of these principles should guarantee, in my view, if these principles are achieved, they should guarantee peace, social progress, the dignity of the person, dignity in society, and humanity in general. That notwithstanding, however, many individuals still have not seen their rights being fully realized under those frameworks, including the failure of the United Nations to guarantee that genocide, the most heinous of human rights violations, is not repeated after the Holocaust. On several occasions, we have proclaimed never again, but unfortunately, we see history repeating itself. The United Nations at the turn of the 21st century adopted the responsibility to protect framework after the Rwanda genocide. The framework seems to have disappeared in thin air. I don't seem to hear about it. I don't know if you people hear about it, or if some of you know about it. The failure of the international community to ensure that as we mark 75 years of the declaration, that the Palestinian people have to date not got their own home. And for these people, this declaration makes the promise we have been talking about a hollow promise. Currently, events in Gaza are a cause of concern to many of us, at least to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well. The human rights and egregious crimes committed by Hamas on October 7, including the abduction of Israeli women, children, and men, must be condemned. I join hands with all who have condemned the host-taking that occurred on that day. However, I similarly condemn the violence against the innocent Palestinian civilian population in Gaza who are resisting occupation, be it in Gaza or in the West Bank. The Israeli occupation of Palestine territory was declared illegal by the International Court of Justice. However, we see the continued arrest of children, young men, and women, some of them for throwing stones, resisting the occupation. This is a clear manifestation of disregard for the internationally recognized right to self-determination. The attacks on the civilian population unfolding on every day for the last 2 months on our television screens of babies, women and children, the attack on UN facilities, hospitals, where innocent displaced people are sheltering, attacks in the West Bank refugee camps and villages, particularly by settlers, demonstrate the perceived lack of respect for human rights, freedom, and justice for all that was envisaged under the Universal Declaration. Let me emphasize, the right of Israel to exist since 1948 is recognized by many states. However, the defense of its territory and its people must be conducted within the confines of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, not arbitrarily. The Palestinian people have rights as the Israeli population have as well. All people who fought for their freedom would understand what I'm saying. And I'm saying here, and let me be a bit clear on this. We have known terrorists transforming into statesmen in a matter of a day. You were a terrorist yesterday, today you are president, you become a statesman. And this is what is founded in the right to self-determination. The disruption of humanitarian assistance, and I'm talking about Gaza. The disruption of access to water, health services, and most of all, the right to life cannot be tolerated anymore. I join others to call for an end to the fighting in Gaza and call upon the parties to the conflict to search for a permanent ceasefire and the establishment of a state for Palestinians under the two-states formula. This will guarantee peace and respect for human rights for all people in the region, and they will see the fruits of the Universal Declaration. While we mark the 75th anniversary of the Declaration, it is difficult to forget that considerable size of the world population continue to struggle in poverty, without dignity, no freedom from hunger, diseases, and other social ills due to the failure of the international community to implement and meet the SDGs targets in a timely manner. Economic and social progress since the adoption of the Universal Declaration across the world has been marked by great strides. However, there are many pockets of abject poverty that negate the achievements of economic growth. Over the last 75 years, there has been great economic growth across the world, technological advancement, and the independence won by many countries, which were thought to be vehicles through which humanity would achieve the goals and the principles inspired by the Declaration. In a United Nations report titled 2023 Global Sustainable Development Report, which takes stock of the progress on SDGs between 2015 to date, states that since 1945, this report goes back to 1945 at the end of the World War. It says, since 1945 to the year 2020, 2 billion people have lived under conflicts in various affected countries. In other words, the United Nations came and said, never again, saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war, but there have been conflicts all over. I don't know if there is a day when the guns have gone silent across the globe. It says that during that time, 2 billion people have lived under conflict-affected countries. 2 billion people. The world population is currently now, I think, UNDP will correct me, it's around 7, 8 billion. So for that period, even when the population was still around 5 billion, now it is 7 or 8 billion. 2 billion people have been living without peace for the last 45 years, for the last 75 years. By 2021, according to the same report, the number of refugees and internally displaced persons in 2021 was the highest ever recorded. It stood at 89 million. I am sure that by the end of this year, or by the time the 2023 figures are released, it will show an increase on this number of the refugees and internally displaced persons. Armed conflicts continue unabated in Eastern DRC, at our doorstep, Sudan, Somalia in Africa, in Ukraine in Europe, and in Gaza, as we just said before. The same report asserts that conflict and unrest are barriers to progress to the realization of SDGs. While the international community, donor countries, the United Nations have been trying as much as it can to see the SDGs targets achieved, conflicts have gone unabated. So as a measure of achievement of economic and social progress, this report, I say, is a serious indictment on the challenges related to principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration. So, in conclusion, what is my assessment of the legacy of the Universal Declaration at 75? I submit to you that it remains and it is an inspirational document. It is a foresighted document that inspired the freedom of many people across the world, and its achievement should not only be seen through the mechanisms and the frameworks that exist, but through the progress made by humanity during these 75 years of its existence. But more than a set of measures that still need to be undertaken for its eventual realization, or the full realization of the dignity, freedom, and justice for all that we all yearn for. I dare say its realization is still a long way to go. Since we cannot achieve its full realization, it remains our duty now and for the future generation to continue the fight to ensure that it is realized, as has been the case since it was adopted. This brings to the end my remarks, and I want to thank you again for your attention. Thank you very much.
Asante sana, wakili msomi, wakili Nyanduga.